Tuesday night, 21st, instead of Sunday night.
Get my good side here. Since everyone's here, we'll go ahead and get started. Call this meeting to order, the law enforcement meeting. Did everybody get an agenda in 7 minutes from the past meeting? Here, if you need one committee, the chairman is myself, vice chairman is Gary Walsh, and secretary is Beverly Atwood. Open the floor for nominations for chairman.
Make a motion to leave them off.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion to leave the officers as is by Commissioner Burton and a second by Commissioner Jones. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I guess that was done easy enough, wasn't it? Mr. Walsh, you okay with that? Ms. Atwood, are you okay with that? Mr. Jewell, are you okay with it? Not really. Okay, we had no old business carried forward from last month that I'm aware of, unless the sheriff has something he needs to update us on the things that we talked about before. I think all those things have pretty much been reconciled and
We put out security cameras at the Justice Center out for bid. We got one bid out of the company out of Fayette, Reventa, and they came in under the amount we had budgeted for, and they're going to start in about 3 weeks.
okay.
Doing that project.
Remember how much that was?
We budgeted $20,000, and I think it came in
$1950 or something like that. About $1,000 under what we had budgeted.
That's good news.
Is that for inside and out, or?
Well, yeah, it's going to go the inside. It's going to shoot the perimeter all the way around the building. We're going to be able to shoot the intersection here at the Taco, up and down the street, and toward the footbridge, toward the football in that area too. So we'll be able to cover a lot of downtown area. It's going to be in the community room. We'll have a camera in there, and going through the courthouse, except for the offices up front. The clerks, we're not going to have up their office. Shooting the hallways, the holding cells, and the courtrooms.
Commissioner Wall?
Sheriff, are they tied to a DVD? Are they motion activated or
Yeah,
are they continuous?
they could be set on motion or full-time, either way we want to do it. We'll probably set them up different ways, because some of the areas, you know, there's not going to be traffic in very much, and some of them like here in town,
Right.
we'll probably record this all the time.
How long do you think before it overlaps the recording with the recording
Well, it just
24/7?
depends on how you got it set up. If you got it where it's motion, we won't.
Well, I know. If you had it to where it was running 24/7,
Yeah,
like a day
it'll
or
run
two.
for about a month.
Really?
And,
That much data?
yeah,
Okay.
and we could even pull that off and, you know, and save it and reload it too. And same thing we got at the jail.
Right.
We're gonna have a monitor at the courthouse. It's gonna be in our room where you go in there and download. If there's something you need to go back and record and copy or something, we go back and do that. We're gonna have a monitor to the dispatch. We'll have a monitor to the, it's gonna be hooked up with our computer system. This new computer system we got here through the phone lines. And we'll go keep the monitors in both places.
So that's gonna be good. If you got a theft back there and they drive past that, we'll get it
Yeah.
on the camera then.
Yeah.
So it'll be good, more reason than just security of the.
Yeah, back last summer, we had, some people stealing some steel behind Mart.
Right.
They drove by the jail with it, so we was able to go back and get the vehicle with the trailer still coming out of the jail.
Excellent.
It's just one case. There've been several more that we've made around town, using other people's cameras. It really helped out that part too.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad we've got that taken care of, we're in the works. Any other old business, anybody have? Move on to new business, we proposal that you wanted to make us aware of.
Yeah, I talked to them how this conversation came up with them. When they're released from prison out here, ICE will usually drive from Nashville or wherever, Atlanta, and pick them up if they need to go into their custody, be extradited back to Mexico. And during Christmas, there was 3 released out here to prison. And we went in and brought them in and kept them for them, which law says I have to do that. But on holidays, they're
Committee for you to enter into that contract, or do you just
it'll
want to
be
make
up
us aware of
between
it?
us and the mayor through the contract. But I just want to bring it up before everybody, let them know what's going on and what we're doing.
We need a motion on it. Mayor.
At this point, I think he's just updating.
Out of, and it's not gonna be very often, I don't think.
Okay.
Out of last, how long we've been open, we only had those 3. So,
Anybody have any questions about that? For the sheriff?
Still in preliminary discussions, right? You don't have a written.
no, we
don't have a contract
I
yet.
told them I was gonna talk to the mayor and talk to y'all first and let, we're gonna maybe go into contract, and I'll get back with him probably tomorrow.
To me, that sounds more than reasonable, and you're something you're gonna have to do anyway,
Yeah.
so let them reimburse you.
That's right.
What I can do.
Yeah.
All right, if you need something further from us for that support resolution or
Yeah.
something, just let us know, we'll take care of it. Next item was, discussion of jail facilities. We have, Mr. William Wall here with us. President, Chairman, TCF, what are you?
I'm the executive director.
Executive Director.
Yes, sir.
I used to be one of those, I should remember that.
Yeah, everybody has been discussing for the last few years about building a new jail here. I know the grand jury, last 2 or 3 times they've had grand jury, they've suggested it. And commissioners have asked me about it, and the mayor, and the former mayor, and people in the public, so we just take a look at the numbers. I asked William to come in. We have to set up a partnership team. He'll explain all that and how it works. And I talked to Senator Tracy today. Used to be Senator Tracy. He called me, and we were talking about work release program. Me and the mayor and William went to Nashville one day and talked to them down there about that, doing a work release, and there's grant money for that. We just talked about, the jail itself, asked them what the interest rate was. They said it was 2.75, and they could, I think 40 years was the limit on how far they could go with financing. But they would come in also, help set up everything. And they're the same ones that done the water treatment expansion. And they would come in and help the bonds and do all that also. But
Give you the floor,
William,
won't you?
take it from
Fill us
here.
in.
Okay. Well, good.
I'm gonna pass some stuff out if you guys don't mind.
I've got copies here.
But while I'm passing this out, I'll kind of explain a little bit what Tennessee Corrections Institute does. We're responsible for, when we're a state agency, Governor Lee is our boss. We are responsible for inspecting, for training. Oh, thank you. I'm gonna leave my cards up here if you'd like one. We're responsible for inspecting all the correctional facilities that are local, meaning your local jails, some workhouses, police lockups throughout the state of Tennessee. Where would you like me to sit?
Probably right over here in
Okay.
this corner would be best.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to talk back to you.
Oh, I'm fine. That's what they,
Or up there.
right in here somewhere,
So, up in the pool. I have some more I'd like to hand out as well. You have any more of those flyers? I gotta go through it with you. We're also responsible for all the training in the state of Tennessee for local correctional officers and technical assistants. And what I'm doing this evening with you all is technical assistance, whereas we know that your jail has an issue right now as far as overcrowding, and it's old and antiquated. But I will say this, that I've known Sheriff Russell for many, many years, and I've been in this jail numerous times. And for the age and the size of that facility, him and his staff do an outstanding job. It stays clean to the best of their ability. It stays organized. In fact, last week, one of my staff came down from Cookville. I went with him over there. We did a mock inspection of the facility, which helped me get to some of these talking points that I'm going to speak about today. But what I'll do, put your flyers aside, and I want you to pay attention to this document. What you have right here is essentially a population snapshot of what's going on within your facility. And in the blue section up top, it tells you pretty much from the entire year of 2019. These numbers were supplied by the Department of Correction. TCI is not a part of the Department of Correction. We're a standalone entity. Here you go, I've got an extra.
okay.
Yes,
Got
sir.
it. Okay.
We're a standalone entity that is responsible for all these things, but we also use the Department of Correction data because you all do not report your numbers to us monthly. We get your numbers when we come to assist you or come to inspect your facility. We don't announce when we come to inspect. It's unannounced. We're one of the few states in the United States that actually does unannounced inspections. You don't know when we're coming, so that's part of what allows us to get as accurate data as we do when we show up that day, whether you're overcrowded, not overcrowded, people have to work, so forth and so on. But in 2019, just really quickly, if you look every month with the exception of February of 19, December's data has not come out yet through the Department of Corrections. You were over 100% of your certified capacity. And anytime that you're over your certified capacity, it's not a good thing. But I will speak to this, that the National Institute of Corrections states that, and many studies done, County Technical Assistance Service with the University of Tennessee, there's kind of a number between 80 and 90% that you never want your jail, depending on the type of jail that you have, you never want your numbers to exceed 80 to 90%. You may ask why. That's empty beds of people that be in beds. Well, what that allows for is classification for boosts in numbers, so no one's sleeping on the floor. And when I say classification, that means you want to keep predators, in the simplest form, you want to keep predators away from prey. And you have to have places to put them. And if you have open beds, then that allows you to move people around so you can place a person in proper classification. Simplest form I could say is that someone who has a DUI, are they going to go in there with someone who has attempted murder charges? And when you're overcrowded such as you are, sometimes that might be a possibility, just purely because of the size of your jail. And I'm going to get to some of the other challenges associated with that as well. I'm just telling you what we see from the TCI perspective. If you look at this, on average for the past 6 years, including 19, you've been at 107% capacity. That includes a snapshot of July of each year. And the reason we choose July is because that's the numbers that the Department of Correction keeps up with. And it's usually a kind of a mid-peak area of what you're dealing with. So this isn't a new problem. TCI, we also, if you're continually dealing with overcrowding, you can maintain your certification with an overcrowded facility. It's not unconstitutional to overcrowd a facility. It's just the conditions and the things that happen within that facility with it being overcrowded that could cause you problems with litigation or people being injured and potentially getting sued over, you know, injury within the facility. But it's not unconstitutional to overcrowd a jail, so don't think that's wrong. But one of the remedies we have for that is a plan of action. We've been monitoring this for the past few years, and it's kind of been a roller coaster where you can get below your numbers and then you come above your numbers. So we've really worked with the sheriff. Joe Ferguson was the detention facility specialist who inspected in this region. He recently retired. We all hated to see him go, but he recently retired, and he tracks a lot of that information. And he told me 2 years ago, he said, Trousdale's starting to get to that point where you just overcrowded. So what we try to do is we try to look for some solutions to that. But if you look at the numbers, one of the things that stands out is the number of Department of Corrections inmates that you're holding. Those people are state reckoned, right? They can go to prison. And in theory, that would alleviate your problem, right? In actuality, with your facility, it does not. And if you want to look at the numbers, it does not, because number one, you have to hold those inmates until but number two, much your facility can hold. So even if you got rid of every Department of Correction female inmate within your facility, you're still overcrowded on average every year since 2018 is when it really picked up to your average of 150% in 2015, and overall over the last 6 years you've averaged 150% of your capacity. And remember that 80 to 90% number to talk. And that's where I kind of came up with that it's not going to solve the female problem, because on average for 2019 state female, if you averaged it out across the year, 1 point, get rid of those 2 females, you're still overcrowded. And that's with the locals, your pre-trials, your sentenced misdemeanors, your split confinements, information, but that's basically people who can't go.
We've been having also, we've had some there at the mental health, and we've been having to lock some of the females in the drunk tank to keep them isolated from cells. It's got 2 beds in the cell, and sometimes we have to take 2 women out by themselves away from other females. We have behavior issues and get them out, and that puts more in the floor. We might have 1 or 2 taking up 3 or 4 beds where they segregate them out. They might be fighting. There's nowhere else to put them.
And it's a dangerous situation, which potentially dangerous situation. You have a good staff that manages it well, but some of the things that you have, not even really any place to separate them. It's just male dorms. You kind of have to look at it from a maximum, minimum, medium that can all get along together. In a jail that has under 100 inmates, you have as many as 7 technicians, and what you'll have is you'll have solid doors that they doors, and you can let these 2 doors out at one time, and then they don't have that luxury. They just have to move them from one cell to the next, and they have 2 isolation cells. If you could speak to what you've had to hold in there, and it's typically mental health.
Tonight, on those 2 isolation cells, we got a mentally ill person in one of them. We can't put him with the rest of the population. And in the other one, I've got one we got from prison that we're holding for Mississippi. And he's one of the gangs down there in Crips.
Right.
And we try to keep them isolated from the rest of our population.
That means one thing. However, before they had a propensity to send them home, and more slaps on the hand to say, okay, get out of here. But the charges have piled up so much that this isn't something that's a new problem. Just that now it's at a boiling point across the state, and it's not just in Trousdale County. It's in every county. This is not and nationwide. We're seeing the female population spike, and that's the input I receive from the judges, that there comes a point, and we're They're just having to sentence them and put them behind bars. And that's unfortunate, but that's just what we're given, right? So moving forward with that, with some of the problems I talked about was there's no classification in the facility. I say no, it's minimal. And for the sheriff to have to fight that battle, he's having to work with other counties to house problem inmates. He's having to allocate cells for different needs, for different people, taking up bed space for one knucklehead, right? I'll refer to them as knuckleheads, but it does happen because ultimately when we look at our jail, most of the people who are in our jail are from our community, right? No matter what, when they get out of jail, they're coming back into our community. So that's where they're going to be. But what it doesn't do is, even though they'll be back in the community together, when they've committed a crime and something more serious, and you classify that person, and you have an attempted murderer in with someone who had 3 DUIs, you're looking at a powder cake there, and it can be dangerous. And with 3 cells essentially and 2 lockdown cells, you're playing with fire a little bit at this point. And one of the remedies could be get rid of your state inmates, and that you won't be able to get rid of all of them, but it is a remedy, and I always bring that to the table because we like to work with facilities who are, who if we can reduce the population, let's do that. No one wants to build a jail. No one wants to build a jail in their community, and I get that. But this point is something that you have to kind of keep it on the back burner to go, look, this might be something we need to consider moving forward. But I'll give you all some more information about that as I move along. But if you look at the little pink section down here, orangish pink section, the average population for 2019 was 49.73 inmates. So you would have to reduce your population 5.73 inmates a day. And that would obviously have to come with your state sentenced inmates. But just to put it in monetary perspective, if you did reduce it on average, because you average holding 18.2, that would have essentially cost you about $81,000 a year based on what you're averaging to hold. I don't like playing money games, but sometimes that helps kind of put things in perspective. If the state inmates there, here's the struggle too, is I know the sheriff utilizes his state inmates for working in the community, so that kind of creates a double-edged sword. But to get down to your 80%, which I talked about, because of the type setting you have, I would recommend that 80 don't exceed 80%. You're looking at removing 10 and a half state inmates, and that equates to about $150,000 a year that you wouldn't be getting reimbursed, which you're currently getting reimbursed from the state. That's a solution, but it does come with a price tag, right?
But that's just a temporary solution.
Yes, sir. It's empty jail space. Sometimes judges look at it like, okay, now I have a place to put this person that I've been putting back out in the community because I know our situation. And I know the judges work well here. I know the DA works well here to try to help alleviate some of that overcrowding. But I don't like speaking for the judges, but I assure you I've received feedback from them about that as well. If there's any jail space, I'm going to put people in it, because there's some people who I've needed to not to put them out in the community because they continue to commit crimes.
But if the biggest percentage or makeup of that, even 10 inmates, is still not taking care of your female overcrowding situation.
No, sir, it's not.
Because you can't put them in there together, and just because you move the men out, it's not making room for the women to overcrowd.
It's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Even if you move cells, you're still going to pile people and put people in cells.
I
And
can't put females anywhere else than what I've got.
Yeah,
That's
there's no
what
more
I'm saying.
room.
So
There's nowhere else to put them.
even if you did that, it's not helping at all with the female overcrowding.
Right.
Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. There's
Another bad thing about it too, when I lock these females in the drunk tank, I got a curtain from the hospital, like you use the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
We got that curtain, we'll pull it across the hallway, and the men and women can actually talk to each other. But we've got no other choice, that's the best we can do. They
And
can't see each other, but they can talk and holler back with each other.
That's part of my notes, which was next on my list, is that inmates communicate through the bars. There is a requirement for sight and sound separation for male and female inmates. That's within the standards, nationally accepted standard. Unless you're constantly monitoring that in Trousdale County, like you have someone sitting back there, all the doors are closed and everything is good, you can kind of manage him and his staff do a wonderful job of managing that. But the minute they have to move someone, like he was saying in the drunk tank, that removes that. Also, in the male area, if you have two people who can't get along, you're essentially moving them to the next cell or the one in the corner, and they can still communicate, and tensions rise, and that's how things get torn up. That's how people get in fights. It's an old way of incarcerating individuals through the bars. And it's because it allows contraband to be passed around. It allows people to communicate who shouldn't be communicating. What if you had two people who had a restraining order against each other in the same jail? You have to communicate.
I'm constantly having to take them to Wilson County.
Right.
To house them for me because of cases where they know each other. We had one, a homicide case, we had last year. I was able to take him to Wilson County because they knew everybody in the back there. And I have to segregate. I can't know where I can put them without they can talk to each other.
Well, and thankfully, there's lots of partners around here that are willing to help.
Wilson County helps us out a lot.
And you and your staff do an amazing job of managing that population.
But I always say help them out too when they need help.
Sure.
We swap out and help each other.
And a good example of what I saw is there's no housing for sick inmates or troublemakers. Or if you do have those two cells open that you can do that, which now you're holding a mental health person in there. If someone gets sick, open their bars, those types of things. Next thing you know, we talk about mass infection. You want to see something bad, and I've experienced this, is get a jail with the flu. I know that it's not a big deal, it passes around all the time, but get a bunch of jail inmates with the flu. I forget which movie it was, the Barfarama, and a lot of mopping, and it gets pretty ugly. I've experienced that where about half the population had the flu, and that gets expensive on your medical bills too. So it doesn't lend to itself. The flu doesn't lend to really housing people who are sick. If there's someone, the sheriff's having to do that too. If someone's, let's say, terminally ill or on high, they require a dialysis or something like that, he would have to send them to Wilson County or Sumner County or Smith County, one of those counties that maybe could handle those types of inmates. But right now, his facility's not set up for that. One of the things I noticed is that the kitchen is borderline inadequate for the number of inmates. It's not a typical kitchen. It's an old house but they do a great job. The place stays clean. The food, from what I understand, is good. Not all jails can say that, but the food is good. The recreation yard is an escape hazard. It's an absolute escape hazard. And due to the space, there's really no internal recreation space available. The overcrowding is affecting that square footage, which maybe you could say in these dorms, okay, if I had 60 clear square floor space, then that could count as their rec area, considering that the outside rec area is, unless I had an officer out there with them the entire time, which is manpower, I would be remiss in using that area. I mean, a skinny enough guy could slide right under that fence where it continually washes out. There's a tree there that someone could scale up and hop over the fence. There's just some issues there. I gave the administrators some ideas, at least on the tree, that maybe some razor wire around the tree, prevent them climbing up the tree to get over. We had talked about that. But right now it's so unusable that it's problematic. There's inadequate area for medical services or laundry services. Right now, the nurse's office is with there's a examination table in the office with the nurse who maybe keeps insulin in there and things like that. Usually you want to keep that separate. I mean, she does a great job of locking everything up. They do a wonderful job with their medical department. We audited it last week. They're doing an outstanding job, so that's good to know. You have one holding cell for the entire facility. There are no booking holding cells, and that's one thing I noticed that's an anomaly. Even some of these older jails that were built we have some that are, one that's still in operation was built in the 1940s. At least they have a couple of holding cells for when they put people in and book them out. What happens now is if you have a knucklehead or you have a mandatory hold, you have to introduce them to your population, even though they may bond out. But if you have a domestic assault, you've got a minimum of 12-hour hold. So you may have to introduce them into your population if that detox tank's being used or what have you. So they're kind of playing with fire a little bit there. Mine is just letting them sit in the booking room in a chair, and you just got to be hopeful at that point. Right now you have an outdoor sally port it's as secure as it can get, but typically we see facilities that have a secure sally port. That way they're not getting out of the car. You lock both doors. There's nowhere for them to go once you get them out of the vehicle, and trade hands from patrol over to the jail. But those are just some challenges that I see with your facility. The number one being the population. Because I want to reiterate again, the facility's clean, the facility's well run, the facility's organized, your medical services are performing a good job, your food services are performing a good job. It's nice to see when sometimes working in an environment like that can when you're really overcrowded like that can take a toll on the people who are having to work there. Because I tell people all the time, they're like, well, what did you do for a living? I was like, well, I was locked up for 15 years before I started with TCI. And they're like, what? And I said, well, no, I worked in jail. So, you're back there with them. And I try to take a look at it from the staff's perspective as well. But with the job that they do, I commend them all the time about the circumstances that they're working on with the facility. Because it does have its challenges. And then with it overcrowding, it exacerbates problems. I mean, they're essentially turning into fire extinguishers. They're having to manage inmates, and it's a good thing maintaining that. But as those numbers continue to go up, because it looks as they are, it may be something you want to consider. But before you ever consider doing that, if you want to pull out your pamphlets, while I'm not the coordinator for the County Corrections Partnership, my deputy director, Bob Bass, is the coordinator for that. That's what he does from Memphis to Mountain City. He goes when jails are in trouble and dealing with some of the same issues you are. What we start is a process of discovering what are the root causes of those problems. Can you solve that problem without having to look at your physical plan? Could you do it through programs? Could you do it through some sort of alternatives? And we start to look at it as a whole. So you have all the information. And before, what we want is for you to be informed and make informed decisions, not to jump to anything and say, we need to do X, Y, or Z right now, or we're not going to do anything. We want to give you all the information. We partner with CTAS in this venture. We bring in Jim Hart, who's a jail consultant for CTAS. He's part of this program as well. For staffing analysis, jail feasibility studies, different things. And the first step of that would be, and I would say the program's free, but nothing's free, right? The program's free, but your tax dollars are already paid for, is the way I look at it. That's part of what we get paid to do, is to assist you through those problems. And Bob would come in and kind of explain some of these things to you. And the first step in that would be a meet and greet and say, look, these are some of the things we have going on that we can help you with. And the first would be a data facet of government from from the jail, the numbers, the challenges you have with the physical plant. He'll take some pictures. It'll all be for you, and kind of present all this information to you and show you what you're dealing with. And the next step would be to either for us to bring CTAS in, or for you to do somewhat of a self-study to look at it, and boots on the ground, bring bring things into perspective, and it can expedite the process of CTAS completing their feasibility study, because much of the data we collect, we just pass right on to them. So right now CTAS is running between, there's only one of Jim Hart, and he's running between 7 and 9 months to complete a study or a feasibility study or a staff analysis. So he's very backed up. We try to assist him with that as much as we can. But all this is, and we want to help walk you through the problems, and we want to help solve those problems. What are you going to need in the future? What are your goals for the future? And you as a collective group, how do you want to address the problem? From the option of all the way to we need to construct a new facility.
Well,
Everything will be out there.
I think the thing that we've always, the direction we like to take is options. We like to know what all our options are. We don't want people to assume that we're not going to do something or we are going to do something. Too many times in the past, people have assumed that you're not going to do this, you're not going to fund this. And we didn't have all options because they made some preconceived notion of what we would or wouldn't do, or could or couldn't do. So options is where I think we would like to see, this is the problem. You can get rid of state inmates, you can add on, you can build a new facility. This is what you will correct if you do this. This is what you will correct if you do that. And I think once we have that information put to us in that way, then we can make an informed decision on what we're going to have to do.
In a nutshell, you just described the entire program.
And that's what my understanding of the program was. And I think your program and my understanding of it is going to align with our thinking and our process and the way we normally like to approach things. And the thing that I've said many times, and I know y'all have all heard me say this, there's a cost to doing these things, but there's also a cost for not doing these things. And that's what we have to weigh. Sometimes we overlook the cost of not doing things.
Yes, sir. And I would recommend to, as you all go through this, and Bob will explain a little more of this, but looking at it from not a 10-year perspective. Look at it from, what's going to happen in 20, 30 years? Do we want, the old pay me now, pay me later? And procrastination comes with a price as well. I mean, that's pretty much what you just said, is that procrastination comes with a price. And if you're not doing that, it's going to cost you more moving forward. But
Ray and I was involved in when we did the addition to the other jail. I was on the commission then, and it was questioned. Did we need to do that? Oh, you'll never fill that up. You'll never fill that up. Do you remember those things?
Yeah, we felt like we went in there and we had the living space for an office. I thought this would last for 100 years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was so, we understand that there's going to be resistance and naysayers, but there's an obvious problem. We know that. We've discussed this over the last few years, and we just need to have options.
And one of the things that's, which I helped build a program, and also I've helped since I start different programs that are dedicated to work release or reentry. And I've worked with those programs. Is it going to solve your problem as your facility as I'm looking at it now? I don't think so. But I think that it's an option you all definitely need to explore, considering they have kept that current building in good shape. And the way I look at it is this, is Dyer County is a great example of that, where they built a new facility, they undershot their expectations. Their new jail is less than 10 years old, and we're sitting at 140% of its, roughly 140%, excuse me if I misquote, of their capacity. And Sheriff Box worked with us and he this program. Well, luckily I helped with the Rutherford County to start up on that one because that's where I was working. And we started that work release program. He took portions of that and started his own program. Highly successful. He just refurbed the old jail. It came up to current standards, and it's highly successful. The recidivism rate coming out of that program, I don't want to quote exactly, but it's around 20%. It's flip-flopped in your jail. Who he puts in that program, and the majority of them are state inmates that he puts through that program, and they're walking out with all their fines, fees, and costs, and their child support. They've got money in their pocket, able to procure housing as soon as they walk out the door. Things that are meaningful versus warehousing human beings. And in some places, especially when you get overcrowded, even if the sheriff wanted to implement a program tomorrow, he doesn't have anywhere to do it. And I think that's why this conversation has started. So moving forward, we can address in the community the recidivism rate, and hopefully the beds that you have at the jail, you know, if you decide to build a new jail, will last you 50, 60 years, and 75 years, whatever it is, if you're addressing it maybe through work release or some sort of transitional program. And yes, sir. And we see it working, and that work release program, Sheriff Box is running from mine, meaning that it really doesn't cost the whole. It's not really costing the taxpayer any money. It took some money to get it started, but once it started, it's not really costing the taxpayers any money.
Several meetings with him, several presentations he's made, various commissioners, things like that from the state level, and it is impressive.
It very much is, and a study he puts up there, him and I are the ones who put that together to say, look, this is how it's impacting the community. It's a positive thing. So I would encourage you as a part of this to really look at that, as a component moving forward, because you're with your jail, it's never going to change. And if your population is growing in this county like I see it growing, because whether you know it or not, I'm a resident of Trousdale County. So I see the population growing here in Trousdale County. And with that, without some sort of work release problem, the jail population is still going to continue to go up, based purely off the population, based off the metro expansion of Nashville. Your neighboring counties, you're going to have people that you're having to hold for neighboring counties because they commit crimes in Trousdale County. So that starts to spill over with those counties growing. Another county that's experiencing the exact same thing you are, but to a much higher degree because they butt up against Nashville, is Cheatham County. They're experiencing a lot of that spillover, and so they're dealing with that on their end, and they're moving forward with the project. But it's built. It's 800 beds in Trousdale County, and your jail population will continue to grow. So unless you start addressing it maybe from a work release end as well, programmatic end, it's just going to be straight line up. You're never going to see that. You might see work release or programmatic end. You're just placing those same people with those same mindsets back out in the community who have $1,800 owed to the $52,000 in child support owed, when that's something they could work on with, as long as they're acting right and good behavior in jail, something they can work on to resolve before they ever get out of there.
And there has been some industry has expressed interest in hiring some, put them to work.
And I think that's where Sheriff Box, that's what he's doing. He's 3 or 4 factories in Dyer County. I think he has 7 or 8, but there's 3 or 4 main employers, and they want more because that's the beauty of a good economy, I suppose, is that everyone can have a job if they want to, but many times a job hop because the next job is paying $1 more an hour. But they'll pay the wages to the inmates what they're paying their employees.
I talked to Jim Tracy, used to be senator. Talked to him today on the phone. He said there's grant money out there available to start these work release projects where they can come in, spend money on working on our old jail, getting it up to speed, and finding jobs, and classing, and maybe go to our school out here, and there's just a different opportunities for them to go in.
Well, the criminal justice reform push from the state, the mayor's been involved with it since he was elected, and we've been following it, trying to stay abreast of it, because we knew we had a problem here, and it's gonna be an even stronger future problem. And, so, I think we need to move forward with this, get, fast in, let him.
He said he's open as soon as February, and for me to just give him a date, and he'll be more than happy, and more than likely I'll be in the room as well. It'll be a meet and greet, he'll kind of walk you through some of the steps.
Do you want to get with him and give him a date would be best for the job, and we'll get it done, or do you want to just throw a date at you now?
You can throw a date to me now, and what I'll do is I will advise him of that date. If anything changes, I will have him contact the sheriff and let him know.
Any particular night of the week that would be better, Tuesday, Thursday?
Whatever works good for the committee.
About sometime the week of the 10th, like Tuesday night, the 11th?
February.
Or do you need to go late?
If you could give me 2 dates, that would be great. February 11th would probably work.
Mr. Chairman, if we could do it somehow other than the 11th, I'm gonna be at a Travis County PTA meeting.
Okay. I didn't have that on the calendar.
Hey, I was gonna say, we have the one set for the 13th for the Parks and Rec.
13th is already Parks and Rec. And,
What,
we want
7,
the town hall, we had it tentatively for the.
February 6th at
6th.
6:30.
Even Thursday, the 20th.
That'll work. So February the 20th at what time? 7? The same
We can
time?
start as early as 6 o'clock.
And then you have another date that you shoot at me? Maybe the 6th date at 7?
No.
Yeah, Republican Party is here.
The 20th, let's say, let's just, I'd say the 20th or 25th, Tuesday the 25th, or even the 27th. Let's say 20th or 27th.
20th, 27th. And both at 6 p.m.?
We'll try to 2 hours, you think?
Oh, yes, sir. That's about what, he can get in and out of here in 2 hours or less. I would say, depends on how many questions. And
We'll have it, we'll just say, instead of an hour meeting typically for us, we'll just do say 6 to 8. Have a 2-hour session set aside.
Well, I'll definitely get him to sit in on one of those dates.
Just let me know, or let the mayor know as soon as you know for sure which one, so we can go ahead and get that on the calendar.
I'll know by tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes, sir. One of the things that part of what we do as technical assistance is knowing the sheriff's very proactive in his plan. And like, if we ever go on this venture, what are things going to look like? So he reached out to me and said, look, right next to our jail and behind our jail, we have space, and we're there, not behind the jail, behind the sheriff's station. Do you think it's possible?
Does it fit? Is it
Right.
enough room? That's one of the options we need to look at. Is that enough physical space if we need to do something? Or do we need to be looking for another location or more land? But that's the kind of thing I'm sure we can get into.
Well, I'll do you one better. He asked myself and Bob came down, and RK, who also is one of our managers, and he asked us to look at that for him. And one of the things that we did is, not architects or engineers, but we measure jails, we know what the square footages look like. And what I based it on was build it bigger than smaller to see what the feasibility was as far as square footage on that property. Of course, you would have to take core samples and all kind of things. And, the back of the property dips off lots of things.
Well,
But
floodplain too.
if I've got a few copies of this, if you guys want to pass it around. Just of a general floor plan of basic needs for a jail. Basic things that you would see if anyone else might want.
So you're not actually attaching to that existing building?
No, sir, that's where it gets a lot more expensive, believe it or not, is when you start attaching things, and the ability to place a sally port would be difficult. But looking at the piece of property, any way configuration, the reason we did this is to say, okay, how could it fit on the property? If you look at the last page, and that's what it essentially looked like, run to your fence line. We measured what your property is. We looked at, and we did an overlay for you to say, okay, square footage wise, if you built I think this one would hold up to 218.
This one level.
No, sir. Well, it's one level with a mezzanine. It's a one level facility with a mezzanine, because if you start building stacked jails, your bottom level is the same as your second level. You're running two jails at that point in time. So it's, one level with a mezzanine, and that's the thing. You all will study all this. This is purely for understanding what type of square footage. Right, and just whether it would fit, but it would also, if an architect comes in, you say, look, we've kind of got this preliminary sketch. It saves some billable time.
Yeah,
Architects
this is
like
kind of what
receiving
we're
this.
thinking about.
And what it would do is, it would show you what property that you already have and an overlay where it is next to the sheriff's office. I did this a little bit ago for the sheriff, just to show him, just to say, yeah, I mean, it looks like from us it will work until you get core samples and engineers involved and things like that. You don't know how much dirt you have to build, put in. You're very close to a creek. There's lots of considerations there. And I'm sure that you would have environmental and everyone else get involved in. But as far as the square footage, it looks like to us that it is a feasible piece of property, specifically for that. But the reason I did it as large as I did at 218 beds is because if you put a 150 bed jail there, a 100 bed jail, you're still going to have a problem. How do you ever add on to that? Just because of the size of the property. So try to make the biggest one I could fit on that property and still look at parking and have those considerations. So you all are actually in a very good spot that you have a place to put it. Most counties do not. They have to go out and purchase a piece of property and look at doing those types of things. So this is just something for you to look at and say, this makes sense. And it gives something for you all to start with, and not saying like, hey, I'm gonna build exactly that jail. It's not just gonna look at that and go, what kindergartner put that together? But we understand square footages, and we measure every facility in the state of Tennessee. So it gives you something to look at and let you know from our standpoint, it's very feasible if you decide to place it there. Because usually in the case where you're gonna go on a project like that, you kind of look at the court system too and go, well, do you need new courthouses? Well, there's a brand new courthouse right across the street, so that's obviously not a need at this point in time. But just something for you to chew on and look at, to think about when Bob comes here, to say, hey, this is kind of what we're looking for as far as what our plans are. But he's going to help you establish that vision and mission and the goals of what your committee is doing and moving forward. Whether you decide you ever want to build a jail or you just want to, keep what you have and revamp it, or in any which way you can. And ultimately, it's your decision. We're not here to tell you those things. The only bad news I came with today is that you're overcrowded, and chances are you're going to end up with a plan of action next year, just because of the steady overcrowding with us. And what that'll require is monthly reporting to us with your numbers and kind of how you're working as a committee to resolve this problem long term.
Well, I think that's one thing that we wanted to get ahead of this problem. We saw it coming, and I know sometimes it's a little easier to get grace when you acknowledge that you have a problem, and the ones that are policing it, so to speak,
Yes, sir.
know that you are aware of it and are trying to do something about it.
Right.
And I think that's, I know Ray has said many times, I don't want to jail, I don't want to do jail, and I understand. I don't want to get jail, but that doesn't preclude that we need one or may have to have one.
It's not what I wanted for, we're gonna have to have. And that's like we don't talk about too. If we start today, it might be 4 years before we ever get into it.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, well, we see as soon as the gavel hits to approve the funding to build, we're seeing about 30 to 36 months before we ever open the door.
It's not a typical week, I realize that. And that site would be problematic. we'll be closing that.
That's what we get started.
But we'll start, and that's what we were trying to do, is get started, and we appreciate your time, appreciate your time. Anybody have any other questions of William?
Yeah, I'm be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
I think we're, get moved in 2027, and we'll all be waiting with bated breath to see what you have to say.
Well, we are here to help, I assure you. I mean, that's the common thing, right? I'm here with the state, and I'm here to help.
I wish you had said
That's
that.
what you never want to hear.
I was on your side when you said that. No.
But truly, and the sheriff can tell you, and I'm sure testimonials from most of the sheriffs right now that there's over 30 counties in this program right now.
Well,
looking at their needs. So
The good thing is that, we know the sheriff is doing a good job, and he's conscientious, and he's not trying to spend money he doesn't have to. And we do have several commissioners with law enforcement background, and currently, and I think they understand the situation. I think that will help us a great deal going forward. And, so I'm optimistic that we can tackle this. We will come to a solution on this. It's just deciding what the best solution is. Like I say, I'm all about options. Show me the options and let me make the decision what's best. And, that's what, if we're asking for anything, that's what we're asking.
Well, I'll show you. We'll walk you through every possible option that you're open to the point where if you guys decide to build, Bob will lay out every step of the way how you should operate as a committee, and I'll leave you with that too. Whether you want to utilize this current committee as that, or essentially the County Corrections Partnership is set up like an ad hoc committee that makes recommendations to the full council. But it's a little unusual. A lot of times we say, get the judges involved, get the DA involved, put a citizen on the committee, people who want to solve the problem. And usually, sorry, Mayor, I'm telling you, usually the mayor appoints those people, but someone from the sheriff's office, if it's not the sheriff, then his jail administrator that sits on that committee, so you all can.
Yeah, and we understand that process as well, because we went through that recently with the criminal justice. So we had the judges involved, or everyone, all those stakeholders involved. And I'm sure if we go to this stage of building, that would be the way we approach it.
Absolutely. Well, great. That's
One other thing, that we need to meet at the community room because of the presentation. If he'll put this on the wall, is he on?
Yes, he'll have a PowerPoint presentation if that's where you'd like to do it. And instead of maybe doing it committee format, if there's nothing to vote on, if you want to have workshops, educational workshops, then we'll do that as well. And just say, look, we're going to have an educational workshop, and when you start getting into the meat of the statistics,
We'll get into the
and things like
nitty-gritty
that.
of it, yes. But I think the person in this committee meeting, we can call it for over there if it's available. If not, we can set up projection.
Well, he'll have one. Everyone has one but me for some reason, but that's okay. No, sir. Bob will bring his next time, so I'll make sure he has everything he needs and some options for you guys there.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion to adjourn? All in favor, stand up and leave.